I'm Phil Hellmuth. In this lesson, I'm going to talk to you about some of the most overvalued hands in poker, suited connectors. A suited connector is exactly what it sounds like. Two cards of the same suit whose numerical values are an integer apart. So, a hand like 6-7 of hearts, for example. A few years ago, most amateurs would almost never consider playing these kind of hands before the flop, and certainly never for a raise. But then televised poker took off, and the same players who wouldn't consider playing these hands in their $1 and $2 pot limit and no limit home games started watching their favorite pros take down big pots with them in $10,000 buy-in tournaments. Do you hear me, Daniel Negreanu? 7-8 of clubs. Nice flop, 5-6-9. Suddenly, suited connectors became the hottest hands in poker. The thing is, though, suited connectors aren't all they're cracked up to be. I'm not saying they're bad hands. In fact, they can be very profitable under the right circumstances. The problem is those circumstances are nowhere near as common as most players think. For example, let's say you're holding the 8-9 offsuit, 8 of clubs, 9 of spades, in middle position at a fairly loose and aggressive table. Is this a hand you want to play in this spot? Of course not. So why does the hand suddenly become so much more attractive if it's 9-8 of hearts? You're still only holding 9 high. And the fact that it's suited? Yeah, great. That's going to help you maybe 2%, maybe 3%. The reason players love suited connectors is because they think they'll get paid off for a big pot if and when they hit their hand. And it will happen occasionally. But let's say you flop your flush while you're holding a hand like the 5-6 of clubs. Are you still going to like your chances of winning the pot if another club falls on the turn? Of course not. So when should you play suited connectors? If you're the first player into the pot in late position, you can certainly play suited connectors for a raise against your opponents in the blinds. Otherwise, remember that these are very speculative hands, which means that you should be looking to see cheap flops with them from other spots at the table. Suited connectors can also be profitable in multi-way pots, especially if you can see the flop for a cheap price. In these cases, you stand a greater chance of getting paid off if you hit your straight or flush, because it's likely that at least one opponent will be willing to call you down with a hand like top pair or 2 pair. Conversely, be prepared to throw that hand away if there's action in front of you and you didn't hit the flop, or you didn't pick up any kind of draw, or you flop bottom pair, because chances are you're drawing thin and you can't win the pot. So with suited connectors, the lesson is this. Just be very careful with them. I mean, I know personally that they just don't win that often. And you know what really pisses me off is when I have the 9-10 of spades and it comes 6-7-8, and I've called a raise, and I'm like, yeah, baby, I'm starting to count up the chips already. You know what I'm saying? Everybody checks, and I make a little bet, and they all fold. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I hit my suited connector perfectly, and I got 0 action. So, suited connectors just are not what they're cracked up to be.